Don't let toxins build Keberangkatan Duli Yang Maha Mulia Paduka Seri Sultan Perak Darul Ridzuan diiringi dev-dev kenamaan. Hadirin dipersilakan duduk. Ampun Tuanku, menghadap Duli Yang Maha Mulia Paduka Seri Sultan Perak Darul Ridzuan, Sultan Nazrin Muizzuddin Shah, Ibni Almarhum Sultan Azlan Muhibbuddin Shah Al-Maghfur-Lah. Ampun Tuanku, beribu-ribu ampun, sembah patik mohon diampun. Patik dengan penuh hormat dan takzimnya, merafak sembah, menjunjung setinggi-tinggi kasih di atas limpah perkenan Duli Yang Maha Mulia Tuanku bercema duli berangkat ke Majlis The Royal Book Launch of Islam and Biomedicine. Sesungguhnya, keberangkatan Duli Yang Maha Mulia Tuanku amat dinanti-nantikan dan sudah tentunya akan menjadi kenangan terindah kepada patik sekalian. Ampun Tuanku, patik merafak sembah memohon ampuni limpah perkenan Duli Yang Maha Mulia Tuanku untuk patik turut mengalu-alukan dev-dev kenamaan seterusnya meneruskan acara dalam bahasa Inggeris. Ampun Tuanku. The Right Honourable Menteri Besar of the State of Perak Darul Ridzuan, the Attorney General of Malaysia, Your Excellencies, the Ambassadors of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Britain and Ireland, Your Eminences, the Muftis of the various states, and the archbishops from across Malaysia, members of the ulama, scholars, the medics and scientists in attendance, vice-chancellors and deans, as well as the heads of medical schools from all over Malaysia, heads of the various federal and Perak state government agencies, directors of corporate Malaysia, members of the al-Akiti family, our media partners, TV Al-Hijrah, Astro, and Radio IKIM, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning and a warm welcome to everyone. Ampun Tuanku. Before we begin today's royal book launch, Patek would like to invite Mr. Isa Robert Martin, an American Muslim convert from New York City, who has been an English lecturer at numerous universities across the globe, including here at the International Islamic University, Malaysia, to recite verses 70 to 73 of Surah Al-Azhab and to provide a translation in English.
Assalamu alaikum. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا. O believers, be mindful of God and speak words direct to the point. يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. And he will put your deeds right for you and forgive you your sins. Whoever obeys God and His Messenger will truly achieve a great triumph. إنا أردنا الأمانة على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملها الإنسان إنه كان ظلوما جهولا. We offered the trust to the heavens, the earth, and the mountains, yet they refused to undertake it and were afraid of it. Mankind undertook it. They are always prone to error and are always rash. ليعذب الله المنافقين والمنافقات والمشركين والمشركات ويتوب الله على المؤمنين والمؤمنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما. God will punish the hypocrites and the unbelievers, both men and women, and turn with mercy to the believers, both men and women. God is most forgiving, most merciful. Sadaqallahul Azim. God Almighty speaks the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Isa Robert Martin, for the simple and elegant recitation, as well as the translation of verses of the Holy Quran.
Setelah diri bertambah besar, di tempat kecil tak muat lagi. Setelah harga bertambah tinggi, orang pun segan datang menawar. Rumit beredar di tempat kecil, kerap bertemu kawan yang culas. laksana ombak di dalam gelas. Diri merasai bagai terpencil. Walaupun musnah harta dan benda, harga diri janganlah jatuh. Binaan pertama walaupun runtuh, kerja yang baru mulailah pula. Pahlawan budi tak pernah nganggur. Khidmat hidup sambung bersambung. Kadang turun, kadang membumbung, sampai istirahat di liang kubur. Masih panjang lagi karangan ni. Pastinya aku akan menulis dan terus menulis lagi.
A short reel depicting art imitating life. Dedication shown by Dato Afifi to the task at hand, a task which fruits we shall all bear witness to shortly. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Ampun Tuanku, it is with great pleasure for Patik to cordially invite Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri Samsudin bin Osman, the President of the International Islamic University Malaysia, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wa mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Menghadap kepada Duli Yang Maha Mulia Paduka Seri Sultan Perak, Sultan Nazrin, Muizzuddin Shah, Ibni Almarhum, Sultan Azlan, Muhibbuddin Shah, Al-Maghfur-Lah. Ampun tuanku, beribu ampun, sembah Patik, mohon ampun. Terlebih dahulu Patik dengan penuh hormat dan takzimnya merafak sembah menjunjung tinggi kasih di atas limpah perkenan Duli Yang Maha Mulia Paduka Seri Sultan Perak sudi berangkat mencemaduli ke ISTAC-IIUM bagi menyempurnakan majlis pelancaran buku Islam and Biomedicine. Sesungguhnya keberangkatan tuanku memberi arti yang besar kepada kami dan menambah serikan lagi majlis ini. Ampun tuanku, dengan penuh hormat dan takzimnya, Patik mohon limpah perkenan Duli tuanku untuk Patik turut mengalu-alukan tetamu kehormat serta hadirin yang hadir. The Right Honourable Dato Sri Sarani bin Muhammad, Perak Pencuri Besar, Yang Tamat Mulia Raja Dato Sri Ilna bin Almarhum Sultan Azlan, Muhibbuddin Shah, Al-Maghfur-Lah, the Right Honourable Tan Sri Dato Sri Idrus Harun, Attorney General Malaysia, Honourable Heads of the Federal and Perak State Agencies, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors and High Commissioners, Honourable Dato Dr Afifi al-Akiti, Fellow Centre for Islamic Studies, Oxford University, Your Eminences, State Muftis and Archbishops, honorable and distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the International Islamic University of Malaysia, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Royal Book launch this morning. The book being launched is a result of a collaborative project led by the Malaysian theologian based at the University of Oxford, Dato Dr Afifi, al-Akiti, who partnered with a medical doctor from Chicago University in the United States. Our special welcome is reserved for His Royal Highness, Sultan Nazrin, Muizzuddin Shah, Ibn Almarhum, Sultan Azlan, Muhibbuddin Shah, Al-Maghfur-Lah, the Sultan of Perak, the Ridzuan, who has graciously consented to launch the amazing book. IIUM is extremely delighted to have the presence of His Royal Highness in ISTAC today to celebrate this auspicious occasion. This is indeed a historic event for IIUM, since this is the first time ever that His Royal Highness has set foot in ISTAC. The new ISTAC building, that is, as I have it on good authority that His Royal Highness had visited the old ISTAC building in Damansara, which is no less a magnificent palace than this one, although a smaller one. We are also very pleased to welcome Tuanku to visit Muhammad Najib Al-Atas Library house here in ISTAC, following the end of the Royal Book launch. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we at IIUM wish to congratulate Dato Afifi and all the scholars who were involved in this book project, including proudly one of our own, namely Emeritus Professor Dato Osman Bakar, holder of the prestigious Al-Ghazali Chair of Epistemology and Civilizational Studies and Renewal here at ISTAC-IIUM. Titled Islam and Biomedicine, the book focuses on the intersection between the Islamic theology as well as ethical tradition and modern biomedicine in both Islamic and modern Western civilizations. The book addresses issues that are of great interest, especially to theologians and philosophers, scholars and ulama in medical jurisprudence, and medical and health practitioners. And the public and policymakers all over will no doubt benefit from the book as well, as it is accessible and well written. IIUM is proud to be part of this significant event. Our Kuala of Medicine in Kuantan campus is one of the joint organizers of the International Symposium on Islam and Biomedicine that is part of the Royal Book launch, which will continue to the end of the day today. The other joint organizers are Faculty of Medicine from the University of Malaysia, University of Kuala Lumpur, Royal College of Medicine, Perak, and of course, alongside the University of Oxford, whose illustrious scholars are with us here today. We wish a great success to both the Royal Book launch this morning and the International Symposium on Islam and Biomedicine this afternoon. On behalf of IIUM, I would like once again to express our sincere appreciation of the honor given to us to host the Royal Book launch and the International Symposium to be officiated by His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Muizzuddin Shah. Ampun tuanku, ibu ampun, sembah patih, mohon diampun. Sekian saja persembahan ucapan patih. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri President, for delivering those warm words of welcome. Ampun tuanku. Patih would like to now invite Yang Berbahagia, Dato Dr Afifi al-Akiti, to humbly invite His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Muizzuddin Shah, the Sultan of the State of Perak, Darul Ridzuan, to deliver the royal address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you today to celebrate the launch of Islam and Biomedicine, edited by Malaysia's own Oxford Muslim theologian, Dato Dr Afifi al-Akiti, in collaboration with Dr. Padella from the University of Chicago. This remarkable collection of 13 essays in the world-famous Philosophy and Medicine series is a masterclass in interdisciplinary scholarship, bringing together the discourses of science, medicine, theology, and philosophy. These essays demonstrate the richness and the new perspectives that can be achieved by placing these diverse disciplines and world-renowned scholars in conversation. This book is the result of a major scholarly project supported by the Templeton Religious Trust, an organization renowned for its support of the world's greatest minds, with over $1.8 billion of funding given since 1984. Its founder, the contrarian investor John Templeton, believed in advancing humanity's understanding of the profound questions in life. This particular project brings together some of the world's top Muslim theologians, medics, and intellectual historians. It represents a serious and original attempt to integrate religious, moral, and epistemic frameworks and provides a holistic approach to the bridging of two very different bodies of knowledge, namely Islam, an ancient religion, and biomedicine, a modern science. The titles of the book's 3 sections are indicative of its impressive breadth and erudition. We begin with a historical perspective, looking at early Islamic contributions to medical knowledge in the first section, entitled From Greek to Islamic Conceptions of Health and Biomedicine. In its middle section, The Meaning of Life and Death, the collection brings Islamic and medical understandings together in a wide-ranging existential exploration. And in its final section, Interfacing Biomedical Knowledge and Islamic Theology, the book focuses on the intersection between Islamic law and modern science, illuminating areas of conversion and divergence. Across these 3 sections, it is no exaggeration to say that Islam and biomedicine explores some of the most fundamental questions facing humankind. What does it mean to be human? When does life begin and end? What roles are played by choice, compassion, and faith within the modern sphere of biomedicine? These are questions which matter to all of us, but which we often push to the back of our minds, either because they are too large, too philosophical, or difficult to grapple with, or because we are simply too preoccupied with more immediate concerns. I would like to commend Dato Dr Afifi for his vision in pursuing these deep and important issues, and want to congratulate every one of his collaborators for their deft, sensitive, and illuminating handling of their subject matter. In their introduction to this volume, the editors write that their aim is to draw sustained attention to the intersection of Islam and biomedicine, to seek ways in which these two seemingly opposite sources of knowledge, rationality versus revelation, can and indeed must work in harmony for the good of humankind. The collection seeks to and finds areas of complementarity, ways in which the two discourses, science and religion, can contribute to and learn from one another. This unusual endeavor of bringing ethics, Islamic theology, medicine and science into the same conversation feels extraordinarily timely for a number of reasons. Though the COVID-19 pandemic began over 3 years ago and is now no longer a global health emergency, the medical, emotional, and societal repercussions continue to be felt the world over. It was a crisis of unprecedented scale, and one for which biomedical scientists, health professionals, and governments, initially at least, appeared ill-equipped. The world did mobilize, of course, with lockdowns and travel restrictions imposed to limit the spread of the disease, and vaccines developed at record speed. Indeed, we are very fortunate that Professor Tess Lam, who helped design the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine, has traveled from Oxford to be with us this morning to celebrate the launch of this book. Thank you, Professor. But the need to react so rapidly in the face of crisis left little space to consider the deeper psychological and ethical implications of such an event. Such as, for instance, how to balance an immediate medical threat to one vulnerable group with the potential longer-term mental health impact on another. Or to consider what room is left for individual agency when mass collective action is necessary to overcome a major health emergency. Or how to make decisions in circumstances where the more compassionate course of action may also be the one that potentially promotes the spread of a deadly disease. So while we might now be better prepared in logistical terms for future health emergencies, I do not believe our global community is yet fully capable of addressing fundamental ethical questions like these. And it is in areas such as this that the work and thinking presented in Islam and biomedicine can make such an important contribution. Here, we find essays on the tension between medical determinism and Islam's conception of the human as a free moral agent. We have explorations of holistic and atomistic approaches to human health and the different perspectives offered by each. And we have throughout a sustained interrogation of the question of what human life is and why it matters. These essays, in other words, model for us a way of thinking through difficult moral questions to which medicine, faith, and compassion may all give differing answers. The world needs much more of this thoughtful, collaborative, and ethical exploration if it is to prepare itself effectively for the global health challenges of the future. In its consideration of such fundamental questions about the nature of human life, Islam and biomedicine also intersects in significant ways with an even more recent and no less seismic development on the world stage. I am talking, of course, about the impressive advances made in generative artificial intelligence technology with the launch late last year of ChatGPT, along with similar highly advanced AI models. AI has rarely been out of the headlines since, with momentous advances it enables being welcomed and celebrated, especially in the medical field. In recent weeks alone, we have heard how AI can help match patients with more tailored and therefore effective treatments, how it can cut radiotherapy treatment times, and how it can speed up the discovery of new antibiotics for tackling superbugs. There is even talk of an AI-powered medical revolution with rapid, life-saving advances in diagnosis and treatment. But for every article celebrating the potential of AI to benefit humankind, there are others decrying its dangers. AI, it is feared, will displace huge numbers of jobs, sending shockwaves through the economy of a kind not seen since the first industrial revolution in the 19th century. Its extraordinary ability to generate text and images almost simultaneously poses a threat to creativity and how it is defined, raising challenging questions about intellectual property rights and the value of the human imagination. Many of the much heralded medical breakthroughs I've just mentioned are also not without their ethical complications, including, again, those concerning rights over data. And what happens when an AI gets it wrong? As we have seen play out in various sci-fi movies, such as the sentient supercomputer HAL in Sidney Kubrick's classic film 2001: A Space Odyssey, or even the hostile AI Skynet in James Cameron's box office hit The Terminator. At the heart of these fears around AI is a fundamental question about what is unique, what is valuable, and what is sacred about human consciousness. Across its 13 chapters, Islam and biomedicine considers this question again and again from a range of perspectives. And even beyond that, the book itself is the epitome of everything that AI cannot do. AI can do many things. It can diagnose, prescribe, generate content, collate knowledge, all at superhuman speeds according to the data sets and models on which it is trained. But it cannot reflect. It cannot, as our brilliant human medics and scientists do, look at the data and then make holistic judgments about the best course of action, taking into account a patient's physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Neither can it follow in the footsteps of our wise philosophers, our theologians, our ulama, whose work must often venture far beyond the realms of data. AI machines are not moral beings, able to comprehend ethical nuances and apply compassion to complex situations and decision-making. Only humans can do that. The Quran famously declares, as we heard from the beautiful recitation earlier, that even the mountains, the heavens and the earth refuse such a burden of trust. No wonder then that the Quran describes that indescribable uniqueness and mysterious quality of the human consciousness in this memorable passage, and I quote, "They ask you about the human soul, the ruh. Say, the soul is part of my Lord's secret. You have only been given a little knowledge," unquote. I see the book, Islam and Biomedicine, then, as a strong testament to humanity and to the unique contribution humans can and must still make, even as AI expands and accelerates in the years to come. Yet the book is also, I believe, a testament to something else, to something that involves not looking forward, but rather backwards, at the long symbiotic history that exists between Islam and medicine. For while this book is a model of how science and ethics can intersect in general, it is also more specifically a distillation of the way in which Islam and medicine can illuminate and work with one another. After all, Islam and medicine share a long and fruitfully intertwined history. Many of the core foundations upon which scientific and medical practices are still based originated with Muslim scientists, as this book reminds us. Medieval Islamic scholars introduced the concept of control groups in medical experiments, for example, building on the knowledge of the Greek counterparts. In the 9th century, the great Islamic physician Al-Razi published treatises that contributed to humanity's understanding of the then deadly diseases, smallpox and measles. Islamic scientists were the first to observe the efficacy of alcohol as an antiseptic. And in the 13th century, the Muslim physician, who was also a famous Islamic theologian, Ibni Nafis, described pulmonary circulation more than 300 years before William Harvey. Although it is the English Renaissance anatomist who is generally credited with its discovery. Perhaps most significantly, it was the work of medieval Muslim doctors and scientists that led to the development of hospitals as we recognize them today. In the 9th century, the first Islamic hospitals began admitting patients from all economic backgrounds, irrespective of sex, religion, or ethnicity, organizing patients into wards by gender and diagnosis. This core concept and structure underlies hospital systems around the world to this day. While Islam and biomedicine is interested in differences of opinion and working through contradictory ideas, therefore, its foundation is very much one of harmony. Islam and medicine, in so many ways, go and always have gone hand in hand. These early medieval Islamic hospitals were funded through Waqaf, the charitable endowment given by the rich, and Zakat, the charitable contribution for the poor and needy that is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. The duty of care for one's fellow human is enshrined in the religion of Islam, just as it is enshrined in medical practice. For the well-known hadith tells us that the Prophet ﷺ said, and I quote, "God has not created an illness without also creating a cure for it," unquote. And the Quran categorically states that if anyone saves a life, it is as if he saves the lives of all mankind. The directive to care and to cure, this is at the heart of, amazingly, both Islam and medicine. I would like to commend all those involved in this book, once again, for contributing to a collection which is at once a brilliant and timely intervention in our modern world and the continuation of a long intellectual tradition. I am moreover proud to celebrate this project, initiated by Dato Dr Afifi, a world-renowned scholar in his own right, who has contributed so much to contemporary Islamic thought and scholarship, yet always grounded in his Malay Islamic roots. The world needs more collaborative and interdisciplinary efforts like this, and I hope this important book paves the way for future joint projects between the ulama, the religious scholars of Islam, and the modern scientists and medics. Indeed, I am pleased to see that many of Malaysia's deans and heads of medical schools are gathered in this magnificent hall, particularly as this morning's book launch opens the one-day international symposium on Islam and biomedicine, the first of its kind to be held in this country. My heartiest congratulations to Dato Dr Afifi and to all his collaborators from around the world, and it is with great pleasure that I officially launch Islam and biomedicine. Thank you.
Ampun Tuanku, Batik would like to request Your Royal Highness to kindly remain on stage for the book launch ceremony, please. Thank you, Your Royal Highness, for an amazingly profound and thoughtful speech. Pathe, and I'm sure the audience were moved by Tuanku's every word. It was truly an elegant and dignified royal address which befits the occasion of proudly celebrating the achievements of one of Malaysia's most famous sons. Ampun Tuanku, Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, we now begin our special forum on Islam and Biomedicine. The Springer book, Islam and Biomedicine, initiates conversations at the crossroads between the rich and long-standing Islamic intellectual tradition and the modern but diverse disciplines of biomedicine. As we learnt from the royal address presented by His Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, Dato Afifi's pioneering collaborative project has brought together scholars from all over the world, from the west to the east, bringing together both the ulama and the medics in a multidisciplinary caravan to engage in one fundamental question: how might biomedical advancements today inform and work with the Islamic theological and legal traditions? Pathe would like to kindly invite Dato Dr Afifi al-Akiti, the man behind Islam and Biomedicine, who has also just recently been announced as being inducted into the Senior Fellowship at the Royal Al-Bayat Academy of Jordan by His Majesty, the King of Jordan. He has also been listed in the Muslim 500, the world's 500 most intelligent and influential Muslims. But they would like to invite Dr. Afifi to kindly join us on stage, and he will be taking his place alongside Professor Tess Lam, OBE, who designed the Oxford vaccine, which saved millions of lives over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, we're very lucky to have these two world-famous Oxford dons celebrating the royal launch of the book with us this morning. They will be engaging in a robust conversation, and ladies and gentlemen, we should also invite you to join us in this conversation momentarily. I shall now hand the floor to Dato Afifi to take charge of this conversation.
Thank you, Moderator, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very great morning indeed. So this is not going to be a very long forum. It's interesting that, as the moderator mentioned, that this is a special forum. It will be indeed a very short one. And given that we are two Oxford dons here, Tess, we'd like to welcome you who've come all the way from, is it sunny or raining England at the moment?
Very, very grey.
Very, very grey. So I think Tess is actually quite fortunate to really...
I am. And I want to extend my thanks both to you and to His Royal Highness for inviting me here today. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you really for coming all the way here. The one who saved almost how many, 6 million lives or so, etc. I mean, billions of lives actually.
It was a large team, but yes, it was about 6 million in 1 year.
Yeah. So I thought what would be quite interesting would be that here we are from Oxford, and in a setting where you actually have two scholars, there is a term that we use in Oxford called the tutorial. And I thought that we might share a tutorial here in the presence of our, in this magnificent hall there. And for those of you who might not know the tradition of the university, the tutorial system is something which, when you have two interlocutors, not so much debating, but really having a chat. And this is one of the beauties of actually studying at the University of Oxford. It's really when you actually have a chat with your tutor, with your sheikh, we say in the Muslim tradition. It's almost as if those young ones among us, when they watch Star Wars, they think of the Jedi Master and the Padawan. And that's the sort of relationship that is there when you actually have a tutorial. And I think if you're okay, Tess, I mean, we're going to have a short Oxford tutorial here.
Sounds wonderful.
A nice chat about really Islam and biomedicine, and just to show Malaysia how a tutorial basically is done. I mean,
very happy to.
Now, I mean, as probably one of the most eminent scientists in the world, who had been behind the greatest historical and medical emergencies, in fact, in the world, I think, you know, and all of us would remember possibly two events in your life. One is 9/11, I think, in the West. They remember the building falling down. But I think this is the other big event that we remember. But the only thing about the pandemic is that it didn't happen overnight. It was almost like a slow motion train accident about to happen. And I was just wondering then, given this, where were you and when were you actually, that moment that came to you that this is a pandemic knocking on our door, before even the World Health Organization and WHO and others maybe realized? I mean, perhaps as one of the eminent scientists, that you've had a sneak preview, and given that there are all these conspiracy theories out there, you never know whether, hopefully scientists are not the ones behind it in the first place.
So no, actually it comes back to something very close to my heart, and I think very close to most religions. It's family. And my brother was at the time living abroad, living near where the outbreak was occurring, the epicenter. So he was living in China, and I followed any outbreaks that occurred in that part of the world very avidly, because I knew my Irish mother would ask me what would happen to my brother. So it started very, very small for me, and it was a dry run for what we hoped wouldn't be a pandemic, but it was an exercise in how fast could we go if this happened. And with the increased familial interest and the vested interest in trying to keep a mother happy, I was fully on board before we even knew it would be an outbreak. And I must admit that at that time, I thought it would be flu. Everybody thought it would be flu. I think for many, many years, many governments had planned for a flu pandemic. And some of those learnings were great, and some I think we need to be better prepared next time. So it started very, very small. The vaccine, myself and Sarah Gilbert had a conversation, Professor Dame Sarah Gilbert, but just Sarah to me, had a conversation in a corridor about should we go and should we go fast? And we thought we should. But it was very academic at that stage. It was very, two scientists trying to see how quickly they could make a vaccine. We were hopeful that we wouldn't need it, but we're very glad that we had prepared in those early months.
Right, so there wasn't really a moment when you really think that this is going to happen, not like 9/11 really.
No, in science there are very few of those eureka moments. Scientists are on occasion very joyous individuals, but generally quite dour.
Right.
So we don't ever jump up from our seats shouting eureka. It's a long, hard slog, but when you get something as momentous as this happening, you really need to give it your all, and that's what we did.
And if I may, Tess, I mean, what made you want to be someone who actually work in the field of vaccines? I mean, it's not something that you actually think of, that 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old child thinking I want to become someone who might save, a couple of million lives in the world and so on and so forth. I mean, how do you end up becoming someone who actually is in this field at all?
It's a really good question. I was always one of those very geeky children who loved science. I also loved art. I loved creativity, and I followed what I loved. And I was very lucky that I had a family that supported me in following what I loved. And in doing so, I had a very interesting career in Oxford, but didn't see any impact with what I was doing. It was too academic. And vaccines at that stage were seen as a safety blanket, a safety net. They continued to save millions of lives through routine childhood immunizations, but nobody had heard about vaccines to the extent they have today before the pandemic. So I moved into a field which was generally considered almost a dead science, and I did that because I was interested in seeing a translation of my life's work to make an impact. And also, in my opinion, there isn't enough work or resources put into diseases of impact in low and middle income countries. And for those types of diseases and those types of medicines and vaccines, it's generally academics that will push those endeavors on because there isn't a large pharmaceutical interest in making those types of interventions.
Right, and I think going through the pandemic, most of us thought that this is not just the one vaccine, by the way. I mean, we think that this is the Oxford vaccine, but there is a host of many other ones. You know, you've got the Pfizer vaccine, for instance, the Moderna. There are even, I think, in Malaysia tests. I mean, I think the government here had worked with the Chinese vaccine, for instance. But what is it with the Oxford vaccine that makes it unique then? I mean, is it because it's the most expensive vaccine, or is it, you know, I mean, because some of us are quite skeptical about this. I mean, you guys do this just for the money, is it? Some say that.
Very good questions again, but I will start it by saying, back when the pandemic was at its height, there was a lot of news reporting about how it was a race between the manufacturers, and it was never that for us. It was a race against a virus, and the more vaccines we had that could get into arms and save lives was the best outcome. I'm often asked if I was disappointed we weren't first in demonstrating that we had a vaccine. I wasn't. I was happy that we could get a vaccine, and I was happy that vaccines could get into arms.
So this is like the vaccine race, not like the arms race.
No.
So you're not, you know, you're not worried about being there on the first line.
No, I'm worried about people being safe. That's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about when we started to see the pandemic unrolling, when we started to see the impact it could have, my first thought was for children, because when these diseases happen, they generally impact children and older adults really badly.
Right.
And as a mother of 2 young children back then and having older parents, those were the things that kept me awake. Those were the things that drove you into work every day, continuously working across a huge team. So it was never a race for me against another manufacturer. It was, simply put, a race against a virus. And we were very lucky that it didn't impact children as badly as other respiratory pathogens. I will, however, say I do like our vaccine, so I will say some of the things that I think are unique.
Okay.
It was made at a low cost point, and that meant that over 2/3 of the vaccine that we made went to low and middle income countries. And that is why we do it. That is why we're in science, and that is why we make these vaccines to have an impact in those types of countries. So I'm very, very proud of that.
So the Oxford vaccine, we should be proud of the fact that it has a social, economic element to it, that it is, can I say, is it the cheapest vaccine in the market?
I don't think it's the cheapest, but it's certainly supplied globally, and that was what we aimed for.
Right. Now, just before I turn over, because this is my turn for the tutorial, I'm asking all the questions, and then of course Tess will get her turn, and so I was really confused during the pandemic period, because there was also a period when some of us have to go for boosters, and then some of them don't need to go for boosters, and we got kind of you know, confused over this, and then some of us were on AstraZeneca, which is from Oxford, and some from Pfizer, and those of us, I think, from AstraZeneca, like myself, I don't know, some of us have to go through some demam or something, you know, a bit of fever or something like that. And apparently some of the other vaccines do not appear to have any side effects. So how does it really work? I mean, it's, is it too dangerous to have 2 different types of vaccines in this case? So.
No, not at all. I will start by saying, though, and I was frequently asked this during the pandemic, what vaccine should I get? And my answer to that was, get the vaccine that you can get in your arm to keep you alive. Listen to your health ministers, listen to your country. They are trying to do the best for you. Getting different vaccines has actually proven quite effective. Different vaccines have different side effects. very, 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 very rare side effects. And they cause, so our vaccine will cause you to feel like you have a cold or a flu for a couple of days typically. Other vaccines have different types of reactogenicity or side effects. And actually it's been shown by a number of different very eminent scholars and clinical trials that getting different types of vaccine modalities, mixing and matching, you've actually got a better outcome. So I would take whatever vaccine is offered to you to keep you alive.
Right, okay. Good advice, I think. Now, Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, some of you might not know, by the way, but Tess actually has a brush with Malaysia, although you've really never been to Malaysia, in that years ago, maybe is it about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, there was an outbreak of a very local virus named after a state in Malaysia called the Nipah virus. I think it's somewhere from Negeri Sembilan or somewhere there. And in fact, you were the one who basically invented the Nipah vaccine. And so now finally, after all these years, you've come home to the country where her vaccine has helped to inoculate the people who, you know. So how does it feel like to come now to, it's like coming back home, if I may to say, to see, I don't know whether you have enough time when you're here to see where Nipah is even. So that's a strange feeling, isn't it? So.
It feels absolutely wonderful. And again, I'm very grateful for being invited. I would say it's a large team working on all of these vaccines. No one person can do this on their own. And we in Oxford, a large group of us are dedicated to making vaccines against these types of diseases. And yes, Nipah is one of them. And Sarah and I have been working on that for many years, and Sarah is hoping to start clinical trials soon. So it's a very exciting program. Unfortunately, there are many other viruses out there but we continue to try and make vaccines and therapeutics so that we can help.
I hope this doesn't become true, but just my final question on this vaccine side is, could the Nipah virus become pandemic size one? Could it ever become?
I think we'll skip this question.
Oh.
No. So the WHO and a number of very eminent scholarly bodies and government bodies have made a list of viruses that they think might have pandemic potential. And Nipah is on that list. I actually think for Nipah, there will be some very good vaccines and therapeutics. I think if Nipah were to spread, we would be able to contain it and control it relatively easily. So there are viruses that keep me awake at night, but Nipah is lower down on the list.
Right, and since we have almost all of the deans and the heads of the medical schools gathered here in this hall, this is a unique occasion, Professor Glam. What would you advise the heads of our medical fraternity here in this country? They are the presidents of the Royal College of Surgeons equivalent here, and heads of medical schools. What is it that this country needs to do to put in place, whether infrastructure or otherwise, so that we are, tip-top and ready for the next pandemic whenever it might knock on our door?
So the first piece of advice I would give, and it's an easy piece of advice that everybody can do, is instill a love of learning. If you instill a love of learning of the people that are coming up through your education system, give them opportunities, you've got the next leaders there. For me, during the pandemic and past the pandemic, it's investing in people and places that will get us out of all of the trouble that we are currently in the 21st century. Without passionate people who will take on these challenges, and without cross-disciplinary thinking and approaches, we're not going to be able to solve them. So if we can invest in our young people so that they can take up the mantle for when you and I retire, that's, I think, the best advice I could give to any educator.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I think that's very good advice. Now, that's my part of the tutorial, and then I think I will now pass on to you for you to conduct your part of the tutorial for my subject. I think this is the wonderful interdisciplinary engagements, because I'm not a scientist, she's not a theologian, theologian, but we have to learn to communicate and dialogue in a language we both understand. At the very least, that's a very good reason why we need more collaborative projects. Tess, so over to you.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity. So when you were compiling this book and editing it, what was the single theme that you wanted to get across and communicate most effectively?
Well, Tess, I think the main motive behind this is really the fear that I sometimes have when I read one of the great Muslim scholars of the age, Imam al-Ghazali. He was a great, great scholar. Professor Dato of course, is the holder of the Ghazalian chair, and for those who do not know, Imam al-Ghazali actually is like the Thomas Aquinas of Islam, or the Maimonides of Islam. And again, for those who do not know, Thomas Aquinas was probably the most famous Christian theologian, and Maimonides is the most famous Jewish theologian. So when al-Ghazali is mentioned, Tess, he's like, everybody knows him. And if you don't know him, you just have to remember the year of his death. 1111. Such an easy, year to remember. But the thing about Al-Ghazali was that his main concern was not wanting to see, the Malays would say, melaga-lagakan antara agama dan sains. To see a conflict between religion and science. And I think that was probably one of, he was really well known and known in the world, not just in the Muslim world, but he was known in the world as a great harmonizer. Someone who wants to bring peace to, as His Royal Highness said in his beautiful royal address, to how do we try and make sense of these two seemingly opposite bodies of knowledge, rationality versus revelation. Because when we say, and we talk about rationality, we are talking about our fitrah, which is coming from us. In Arabic, Tess, fitrah means really, common sense, natural, primordial. When we are born, that we have our intellects, for example, as Descartes would say, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. So that's the sense of the fitrah. That's the sense of human beings, that we are created by God, and instilled, and somehow when God created us, we've somehow been programmed that we can think. So rationality really comes from us. On the other hand, religion is not something that is from us. And we sometimes don't think about this. And think about it. Religion means it is something from out of this world, not from us. It's something alien. So here, Al-Ghazali, in his most remarkable statements, one of his great philosophical maxims, if you like, he said that something like, rationality, our akal, is like